Welcome to Footnotes, a behind-the-scenes look at what we value and why it matters here at Foothill Church in Glendora, California.
All right, hey, well, welcome back to our podcast Footnotes for another episode. I'm here with Ike and Bryan. I almost said Ike and Bryan Martinez, like you guys are married or something. But
we've been together for a while now.
Ike Graham and Bryan Martinez, and we're here for another just chat about some pop culture. And we were actually talking about this for a minute via text, just the three of us, about kind of where we wanted to go. And yeah, it's been a while since actually we still haven't really covered kind of a kids movie, and so in some ways that's scratching that itch. And so today we're talking about Soul, which came out in. Was it January?
December.
Was it December?
2020.
Okay. So about 4 or 5 months ago. And so we're going to jump into just what we thought about that. And just a review even too. I think there's an element of like, maybe you're sitting here listening to this podcast, like, why are we talking about Soul? What's going on right now? And hopefully this is helpful to you, but I've always enjoyed just even talking about pop culture in general. And I think that there's an important element to think about how Christians ought to engage culture. And we're not experts at that, but we all are Christians here.
Oh, frankly, it's the language kind of the world right now, is where people are expressing. They don't have a church usually like we do, and like always are in small groups. So
that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. So that's the way they express themselves, and if we want to answer their questions, we should be, I think, listening a little bit.
Oh, well said, Ike. Cool. All right, so today we're jumping into Soul, and actually just to start off, before Ike gives us a little bit of a summary, I thought it was interesting because this is the first Pixar movie in a while that didn't start off with a short. Did you guys notice that?
Yeah.
Oh.
It had no short at the beginning.
Well, I saw it on Disney Plus, and sometimes you don't get the shorts anyway, so unfortunately I didn't see it in the theater.
I think, so yeah, I didn't show a short before that. You're right, that they don't show them, that they're their own separate thing. But there was a short that was released the same day that it was released. I don't know if people watched it.
Oh, same day, just not on the same movie.
Yeah.
It just makes me want to get back to the theater, man.
It's true. All right, well, give us a little bit of a summary of this movie. Kind of what was it about?
Yeah, it's really about big questions with a lot of music. It's about Joe Gardner. He's a jazz piano player who is a part-time middle school teacher, and he has these two passions. And at the same time, kind of his life, it kind of comes to a catalyst. He goes from being part-time to being offered a full-time permanent role, which is scary to him because he's like, oh, what are my dreams? And then he gets an unbelievable offer to go and audition for a really cool group, a jazz group. So he goes, does the audition, and he basically gets in. His life is starting. It's very, artfully beautiful and comedic as he's kind of prancing his way. And of course, he dies on the way basically to the gig. Or on
That's
the way.
like kind of early on in the movie, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
And you can see it coming. It's so funny because like he goes by all these bricks that just miss him, all these near misses, and you're like, oh, he's gonna land, somewhere, and then he dies. And so basically, the journey from there is he basically ends up in Pixar's view of the afterlife or the process to the great beyond. And he's like, no, I'm not ready. Like I'm going back to that gig, And so it's his journey trying to get back to his body in time for the gig at 7:00.
Right.
While inadvertently he helps a lost soul that's kind of been stuck there for a while. There's some lessons along the way.
Yeah. So this gig is kind of this kind of big break for him, right? It's like kind of the thing he's been hoping for and dreaming about for a long time. So Bryan, anything to add from just kind of that summary even?
One thing I really appreciated is how different, I know we'll talk more about this in a second, but like this Pixar movie seems to be different in a lot of ways, where like they, on the themes they touch with, just kind of like the characters that they have, this whole existential thing. And as you were talking, like one of the things I really liked about it was just that it's so ordinary, right? He's this part-time middle school teacher, and like his whole big thing, his whole purpose is just getting to be a recognized jazz musician. And so that's what we see, and we see a lot of like a worldview of like, what does that look like, what is purpose, and those are the big questions it's asking. So I was really excited to talk about this movie.
Cool. And just to kind of, I think, even just complete out like what ends up happening. So Joe ends up meeting with, is it 22,
played by Tina Fey.
Right, yep. So they're interacting. They actually find a way to get back to Earth, but they end up switching bodies with Tina Fey ends up becoming Joe.
Mm-hmm. A little bit like a Freaky Friday kind of fun stuff. Yeah.
And Joe is a cat.
Yeah.
Right. He sees they're in like the dimension, they fall in, and they fall into the wrong bodies. And so it becomes this kind of like, switcheroo thing for the middle of the movie.
And I mean, kind of, you bring up Freaky Friday. Actually, I just watched this the other day with our family, the one with Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, there's something definitely unique about like literally being in someone else's shoes, I think, and kind of seeing the world through their eyes a little bit. And that's kind of what I think Joe realizes and 22 realizes. And to kind of spoil it a little bit, this is kind of where we start to see, in my opinion, kind of like this Disney trope kind of like veer off a little bit, because we really start to understand that like the things that Joe valued in life were different than the things that 22 ended up valuing. So let's talk more about that. How does this movie kind of veer from the typical message of Disney?
Right. Well, can we just we're going to dive into spoilers,
yeah, for
right?
Sure.
So if
Yep.
you've seen it, okay, yeah, on Disney Plus, you should check it out. Yeah. Well, okay, so just diving right in, I like how when we first meet 22, when he goes in the Great Beyond, she's been there for a long time. You get the gag of like the dimensional guardians, like, oh, this is my favorite soul, number 3,347,000,000.
Right.
And here's 22. And so it's like you get this idea she's been here for thousands of years.
I didn't catch that actually.
I actually didn't catch that either.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Well, one of the running gags is that like you keep seeing all of her old mentors. So like Joe goes and he kind of by accident, he has to be her mentor. And so the whole point of it is that she has to get her spark, which is a big deal.
Right.
So like, and Joe kind of internalizes that. He thinks, oh, I got to help her find her purpose. He's like, I know my purpose is music. That's why I want to go back to Earth. Got to help her find her spark, her purpose. And then the running gag is that she's had Archimedes, she's had Mother Teresa, she's had Muhammad Ali, all these amazing people, and they just got frustrated with her. None of them could help her find.
What a great
her purpose.
concept! Like being mentored by these people, and then like I just can't do it with you. Like
it's hilarious to see them just lose their patience.
Yeah.
You know?
It's really good. The gag with Mother Teresa's fun. She's like, I have patience for every living creature except you. I don't like you. Yeah.
That's how I feel about you, Bryan. Actually.
I get it a lot. But so okay, when we talk about like the Disney message, right? That's your question. Like, what do we?
Bit.
Yeah, and I feel like that kind of comes up in our circles, right? I mention that a lot when I'm talking to youth. Of like,
it's kind of an easy target in some ways.
Yeah. But just for like the vernacular of like what are we saying there? Like typically when I think of like the Disney message, I think of like follow your heart.
Yep.
You know, like there's this inciting incident, this thing, and there's this desire.
Yeah.
And this desire kind of leads everything for that character. So I think of like the Little Mermaid. She sees Prince Eric and hey, he's a hunk, and so she wants to be with him. So the whole purpose is her being with him, her being on this other side.
Right.
She feels complete. And you see this with basically every Disney character where it's like they have this one desire and then they finally get that desire fulfilled by the end of the movie and they're good and they're happy. That desire is fulfilled and then they're fulfilled. Everything is really good and perfect.
Yeah.
But that doesn't happen here.
Right.
Joe finally gets his big break. It is really, really great. The more I talk about this movie, the more I realize I really, really like it. And he finally gets this moment where he gets to play in this big jazz quartet thing. And he ends, and you see this kind of like his face shifts from joy to kind of emptiness. He's like, now what?
Right.
And the lady tells him, well, we just come back and do it again. And he just feels empty. Like that's it. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there is an emptiness that seems to hit him, and I enjoy that. I appreciate that Disney or whoever wrote this. There's this sense of kind of maturity to realizing, like, what happens after, Ariel meets Prince Eric. 5 years later, it's like, are they still like singing from the clouds and the mountaintops?
You get to see their first argument, and she
totally.
kind of disillusioned.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember to me too. I think there was what's that movie? Wreck-It Ralph. 2.
Yeah.
There's this moment where all the princesses are kind of in the same spot, and they're kind of making fun of this idea of the princess character. So, yeah, absolutely.
But we do think like that, right?
Yeah.
Like, once I get married, I'll be fulfilled. Once I get this job, once I get accepted, once I get these things, it's like we're so goal oriented, and I love that Soul kind of knocks that out. Like, you achieved your goal.
And they're good goals.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, I mean, him doing well at this performance, like, to have an opportunity to progress in his career, it's a good thing. And so it's not this, like, straw man of saying, like, oh, well, because you chase sex and drugs and rock and roll, it's a good thing.
Right.
And it's still empty. Yeah.
Yeah, but I feel like he has taught. So he tells his mom, he's like, I feel like I was put here just to play. Like, this is my purpose in life, to play piano. And that gets played with a lot of, like, what actually is your purpose. And Joe found out it's not what he thought.
Yeah. One thing I even liked is kind of a different sense of scope. I was thinking of Beauty and the Beast. We have Belle. She's like, I want adventure in the great wide. I want to get out of this town.
Right.
And in a way, they're kind of insulting the people of the town.
That's true. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
And but one thing that's great about this is when 22 comes into Joe's body, the whole message is she's noticing beautiful things about, like, the barber.
Right.
And she has this great conversation with the barber about his dreams and how his happiness is. And I think she talks with Joe. It's like, well, Or she's like, why didn't I know about this before? He's like, well, all you want to talk about was jazz music. Basically, talk about yourself.
Wow.
And notice the people laughing on the corner. It's very kind of like it's a Life is Beautiful, Kevin Spacey kind of vibe of just noticing there's so much beauty in the world.
American Beauty.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Life is Beautiful is that one about
that's the Italian
Holocaust.
Similar.
It ended slightly different. Actually, it didn't end up slightly different. It was actually pretty close to the end.
That's what that is.
Yeah. So, I mean, I remember 22 eating pizza and enjoying that. Just kind of these simple life moments.
Yeah.
And this idea of slowing down, and this is one of the reasons we're talking about soul, is because I think even as a staff, we've been kind of even talking about some of these themes. Liturgy of the ordinary, just kind of thinking about everyday, regular kind of rhythms in life and not chasing that big home run moment all the time. And I appreciate that we kind of get a little bit of that perspective from this movie, that you don't have to, have this amazing kind of Instagram moment in order to really appreciate and be thankful for things. Well, one of the other themes that this movie points us to is the great beyond. So that death is inevitable. There's this idea that everyone's kind of going to go to this place, and kind of, why is that an important reminder? Obviously, we see that differently as Christians too. But what do you guys think?
Yeah, well, I always think, and Chris talks about this at funerals that he does, and I think it's really good. It's Ecclesiastes, I have it here. It's better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting. For this is the end of all mankind, and the living will lay it to heart. Yeah. It's so important to think about these things. And I think, in certain circles and thoughtful circles, you may think about those things, but in media and the language of the world, a lot of times it's really about, it's the here and now, it's the here and now. And you don't really think about the end of your life and what you're working towards. And so I think that was actually really good that they put it right in front of you. For sure. And early in the movie. That was great.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the Bible's really clear that our life is but a breath. It's but a vapor. I mean, it's here for a moment. And it takes a long time to, I think, really realize that. I feel like I've always kind of thought about, what would my funeral be like? But now as I'm getting older, and now that I have 2 kids, and I think about, this is a very real thing, or as family members get older, this is something that we'd prefer, most of us, to not think about this, to not think about that things are coming to an end. I think most of us want to think that, I'm still going to achieve all the things that I want to achieve. I'm still going to be everything I want to be, because we feel an infinite timeline. But that's just, it's not the reality. There is an end to us. There are limits to us. And the fact that there's this ultimate limit that one day we will end forces us to deal with the fact that there's other limits too. Joe may not be this great musician that he wanted to be, because he's also going to die. And so there's limits. I may not be whatever, I'll never be as good as Tom Brady as throwing a football. That's just not going to happen. There's limits to who I am. And so it's good to remember this ultimate limit. And I think as Christians, that points us to who is limitless.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I think that's
Bradley Cooper.
Tom Brady. Yeah.
Tom Brady could do whatever he wants to. Yeah.
Apparently, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a great kind of takeaway, because you're right. Oftentimes with actually movies in general, we oftentimes read ourselves into the story and think about how does this apply to us, and it's like Chandler yelling, "You're not David," kind of thing. But I think it's important as Christians that not only do we realize in humility that we're not the main character, or that we have limits, but also that it should point us towards worship ultimately. That I serve a God who is limitless, and that's such an important idea too.
Yeah. Just for clarity, Stephen's talking about Matt Chandler, not Chandler from Friends. There's no episode where...
I don't know. Maybe he throws in some David talk too.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, one of the things Ike brought up earlier is that because he basically, Joe Gardner dies so early on, the rest of the movie is really thinking about the flip side of death and the idea of just life's preciousness. And so I think there could also be this swing for us as believers. I remember actually Katie and I going through this kind of theological conversation in college a lot, where it's realizing God is ultimate. God wants to be with us in heaven one day. He's going to come and rescue us from this world. And so why is life even worth living too? So there's kind of that flip side. I think Christians can kind of go too far on as well. How do we kind of unravel this idea of life being precious as well, and kind of how does soul speak to that?
Yeah, I think with soul, I think it goes to all the things he overlooked. He was always, it's kind of like Yoda. when he's talking about Luke Skywalker. He's like, long have I watched. I'm not going to do the accent of Yoda, the voice of Yoda, but
what accent is that from?
Kind of like an Italian.
Long have I watched this one. Always looked away, right?
Italian accent.
Not not the what he was a doing. But anyway, always just looking way beyond. I think Christians, we can do that too. Like frankly, I sometimes I think of it when back in the day, I've learned to give thanks for my food rather than saying, God, would you bless all this food, like the stuff that's going to give me a heart attack, you know? But it's all, it's all about my body and, in heaven. I love that Chris has a really good teaching actually on just the importance of the bodies that God gave us. And actually when we're redeemed at the great redemption, that it's going to be a redeemed version of our body. It's not just like obliterated and here's your new 2.0. And even when I read Genesis, I think it seems like God went through a lot of trouble, use that word, to create Earth. It seemed to be really important, this life.
Theologically, that's not really true, but yes, God did not have trouble creating Earth. But
there's a lot of intricate details.
It's our version of trouble. Like you could say, like he
put a lot of thought into it.
He put a lot of thought into it, a lot of care. Even when he creates man, there's a different Hebrew word for when he creates man. It's Yahweh. It's much more just personal kind of Lord.
Right.
And so there is a real important purpose to the existence on Earth, and I think that's what we're all trying to obviously trying to figure out and teach on. But I think soul is good for that, kind of realizing that we in turn should take it very seriously.
Yeah. I mean, the Bible's really clear. Every good and perfect gift comes from God. And so there are good things here that are worthwhile. And I mean, there's that whole old adage where it's like, you probably have some problem with it, where like, if you're too heavenly minded, you're no earthly good. And we are called to be heavenly minded, but there are also things here. And I think it comes down to kind of what you said earlier with Joe. He was so focused that it totally blinded him. Like there's good moments to have tunnel vision. That's another really cool aspect of the movie. He talks about being in the zone. Like when you're really into something, you're kind of into this other place. They talk about it's like in between reality and this metaphysical spot, but you can become a lost soul by being in the zone the entire time. And so, I mean, I think it's totally the same with us. If we're Christians and we become so focused on certain goals or certain things, certain aspects of our life, and in a way it is selfishness. And so we totally miss the forest for the trees, and we just kind of focus on these small things. And you're right, we can miss the beauty of what God has created. We can miss that there's somebody sitting next to us at church who is hurting, or somebody sitting next to us in church who is in joy, and we just don't care because they're not a part of our story. They have nothing to do with our goal. And you could talk even more how that is antithetical to what it means to be a part of the church. We should be looking at other people, or like we miss the lost souls here.
I think the fruit of good theology, the fruit of good just spiritual growth should always end up being outward at some point. It's like there's a community aspect, and not to dig too deep here, but I was just even thinking about like I just finished up a seminary degree. I can seminary right now, and I think in the Reform camp we can tend to sometimes be fatalistic about just even who's saved and who's not, and who's chosen and who's not. And so and this is a little bit of a stretch, but I think I've seen folks in our church in conversations be a little bit like kind of closed-minded to the rest of the world so much because they're just thinking about, well, it's up to God and God is sovereign, and all that's true, but we still have a part to play as well. Anything else, guys? Other themes that you guys appreciate about soul, or things just to take away from that?
Basically, this movie brought back kind of a powerful moment that changed for me. I think just even as an artist, because as an artist or a musician person, you always feel like that you have to go and achieve something to really feel like it's worth all the investment of your time. And that part when he comes up, Bryan, you talked about it earlier, when he comes out and he played the big gig and he'd done that, and he's like, I just feel empty. I remember kind of feeling that way a couple of times when I finally got to do this certain creative thing, or be a part of a movie or play with a certain band, and you're like, wow, I think it's actually when I realized I loved the church. Because I remember being in playing with some good guys, and basically, it was a guy who was a worship pastor, and we're at a big church, and he said, isn't this great that we get to be at this big, massive church, and we don't have to worry about printing music anymore for people who don't know music that well. It was a little bit arrogant. And actually, I remember just kind of realizing, saying, no, man, I love that. Like, I love the church. I love bringing people up. Like, what's the point if we're all just kind of celebrating and kind of like clinking mugs, like, look how great we are. And then I think a second part of that was, this kind of feeling of just the job here. I think was best articulated. We were on vacation it was actually a high level judge in Montana. They let us borrow their house right on the river, Yosemite River arm. And he had, I think it's in the Westminster Catechism, on his wall in the living room says, what is the chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. And I kept thinking of that phrase just throughout this movie. Just that rather than feeling like you need to go and, knock down like this huge milestone, but actually just to be faithful with what you have. And Stephen, you've done a great job of talking about that in a couple of teachings, once with the staff, and I think in a sermon, but also just really enjoying what he's given us, but giving him the credit and the thankfulness for it.
I do love how, I've always been a big fan of Tina Fey. 30 Rock's one of my favorite shows. It's really good. And I thought they used her well, playing up the whole kind of like grumpy existentialism of hating Earth, and like how she's a know-it-all in the beginning. She's like, music, just the idea of it seems a bit too much, and just like food and all these, just like they're nothingness. But yeah, once she kind of like goes out there, that kind of arrogance goes away when she really just experiences things. And so yeah, there's kind of this know-it-all nature of like I have an idea of what that thing would be like, even though I haven't really experienced it. And so I see a little bit of that in myself sometimes.
For sure.
I really just felt a lot of appreciation for the idea of common grace. Chris is one of my favorite quotes. He said in a sermon a couple years ago, he said, how good is God that he made an animal made entirely of bacon. But like the things that we need, like we need oxygen, and so we have trees, and they're not just like these random little ugly things. They're beautiful as green leaves. They're aesthetically pleasing, but they also it gives the air we need, and there's all kinds of things that we need, but God makes it enjoyable.
Yeah.
Right? And so it shows, him. Well, technically it's 22, eating the pizza, right, and just realizing, man, God has been so good to us.
Yeah. I do also kind of love the irony that the whole message of the movie is that like you don't have to be this big famous, totally achieve your dreams to be a fulfilled person. Yeah. Brought to you by people who have achieved their dreams as creative professionals making this movie.
That's funny. Well, and even kind of producing, writing, creating that movie from a place of privilege a little bit, because I was just going to ask this. This is not a typical kids movie. It's not a movie that would like I don't think it did super well in the box office, but
it was released when like during Christmas time when everything was closed.
Of course,
so we don't know.
It's hard to measure that.
Yeah,
but also it's not something that kids want to watch on repeat.
Is this a kids movie? Or this is kind of like a existential
philosophy
movie.
I would say it's wrapped as a kids movie, but it's not.
It's not. Yeah,
I
it really
is. I think the whole like the switcheroo with the guy and the cat makes people think like, oh, is this Secret Life of Pets 3? But yeah, it's totally different. I was asking some people who have little kids what they thought of it, and they're like, man, they kind of liked it. It was kind of boring for them. I heard somebody say that this is made for kids 20 years ago, like the Pixar fans from the beginning, and now who are adults now in their 30s and late 20s and 40s. And I'd agree, because I think a lot of us probably have felt like Joe at a moment where like I really need to achieve this, and I just didn't. And so if you don't achieve your goal, are you a failure? And so I don't think it's a kids movie.
Yeah, I kind of agree. You bring up let's kind of wind this down. You bring up kind of past Pixar films. What's your favorite Pixar film? Kind of where does this kind of lie in I guess, as far as the order goes?
I would say it's probably, there's so many movies. It's probably 6 or 7 in favorites. To me, it's a really beautiful movie. But sometimes movies are kind of heavier like this. I don't watch them as much. Like I think I've seen Ratatouille is probably my favorite one.
Yeah,
and I can't really say probably why it's my favorite. I think it's just so fun and aesthetically pleasing. There's so many nice little relationships going on. There's an ultimate redemption of the critic in the end, and that's really nice. But Soul and kind of heavier movies, I want to sit and watch it and just think about it for a long time and then return to it later.
For sure. How about you, Bryan?
Yeah, so I think Toy Story is probably my favorite. It's
the first one?
Yeah, the first one.
Wow.
It's actually the first one I've seen, the first movie I saw in theaters, and so there's a lot of that. I grew
there's
up
some
with
nostalgia.
For sure. And I think Incredibles is probably the one that I quote the most. Cool. I love that one a lot. But yeah, Soul, I really, really liked it. I kind of like, on accident, I've seen this movie like 5 times now, which is strange. Wow. It just came out. It was just like random, like family was over, they want to watch it, and I just kind of like, the more I watch it, usually I'll watch a movie to death and like, I'll hate it, but I just like, there's something really watchable about this movie. There's something where like it's just a day in his life, and you see this, and so I don't know where I'd rank it, but it feels like it'd be in the top, like maybe in the top 10. I really enjoyed it.
That's cool. Yeah, that's cool. I have to rewatch it honestly, because I watched it with my family, and to be honest, I was getting up, getting popcorn, kind of like checking on stuff at the same time. So I do probably need to give it another view. But for me, by the way, I think my favorite Pixar movie just actually came out right before that, which was Onward. Actually, I really liked Onward a lot.
That was your favorite? Wow.
I think so. I don't know. Something about that brother relationship really just like struck gold with me. And there was this like maybe I wish I had a brother like that, I guess. But and I think too, just not to give that away, but there's this kind of sacrifice moment at the end of Onward that's just really beautiful that I kind of didn't see coming at all. So.
I felt taunted by that movie because at first it's a dad movie. I'm like, well, I don't have a dad. And then it's a brother movie. I'm like, well, I don't have a brother. So screw you, man.
That's funny. Cool. Well, it sounds like you guys enjoyed it. What would you guys give it out of 5 stars?
I would give it a 4.
Yeah.
I loved the depth. Some of the execution, like I almost feel like they actually needed maybe another 3 or 4 months of planning of just how to marry some ideas together. But yeah, I thought, beautiful, great movie.
Yeah, there are a lot of loose details, like you can only get the Earth Pass, like he can have it only after she, stuff that doesn't really make sense. But the whole movie together, I think I'd probably give it a 4. Yeah, I really liked it.
I'm probably a 4 as well. Yeah, so it sounds like we're all on the same page there.
Sweet.
So cool. If you guys haven't seen it yet, check it out on Disney Plus, and definitely some thought-provoking things there. Definitely some things to consider about just how we see life and death and goals and how we kind of measure those things. So, guys, thanks for being on again. Appreciate your time. All right. Well, we're out of time, but thanks for joining us for our podcast, Footnotes. Be sure to subscribe, and we'd also appreciate you sharing this resource with others and even leaving us a favorable review if you feel so inclined. So until next time, Foothill, peace be with you.
Next time is Die Hard, right?